Okay, so now we're going to look at the last part of this organization where we look at facilities planning as being made up of two things, facilities design and facilities location. We spent a lot of time on the layout design, and now we're going to look at material handling, which is sort of the next aspect of facilities planning. The idea of material handling is to get the item in the right amount, the right material, the right condition, the right sequence, the right orientation, place, time, cost, and method. So we're going to go through each of these and talk about what considerations in material handling need to be spelled out in order to choose the right equipment. So material handling equipment is all kinds of things, from what moves the material to what stores the material, anything having to do with handling the material at all. So this is a picture of a forklift, so you can see that's an obvious material handling thing. So we want to look at the right amount of material. So the question is how much to deliver at any point in time. These are a bunch of pictures of different totes and different containers, because that's going to be important to decide, what is the batch size that you're going to be doing? How often is it going to be done? Is it going to be push or pull? Are you going to have smaller load sizes or larger load sizes? So all of those things have to do with what is the unit load that you're distributing in the material handling system. The next thing is that the right kind of material that you're going to be delivered. It needs to be picked from inventory correctly, and so you need to have a good identification system, making sure that you're really getting exactly what is needed to the right place. So all of that falls under the heading of material handling, the ways that you're picking it and the identification system. The right condition, well, this is a picture of a damaged package, so that's one of the things associated with the right condition. But another is that, does it have to be in a package or not? Does it need to be shrink wrapped? Is it sorted or kitted? Is it painted or unpainted? Making sure that you are getting exactly what you need in the right place. So at any point in the system, you need to decide what is the condition of the item. The next is the right sequence. So what material handling methods are you going to be using in order to get items into the right place at the right time? This is a picture of a sorter conveyor, and I think we saw one of these videos in class. The idea that, where is something going to be diverted, and how is that going to be handled into the material handling system? So designing these conveyors is part of that also. The right orientation. This is a picture of a crane that can rotate a heavy item. This is actually really important when you're dealing with awkward or large shaped items, making sure that it comes to the next sequence in the manufacturing process, or comes to the shipping area, or comes to the storage area in the right orientation. At Boeing, they have actually large cranes that rotate the fuselage or the wing in order for it to be in the right position in order to go to the next step. That is also part of material handling. The right place, so making sure that something is transported to the point of use and planning for that. So this relates to your space requirements. You need to plan for the kinds of Kanban systems or the kinds of bins that you're going to be using. So this is just one example of a kind of a bin that can be used. But you can imagine there's a million types of bins. You need to understand where they're going to be placed and how close to the workstation. The right time, so making sure you have on-time delivery. Obviously, that's really important. If people are waiting for things, the material handling system isn't moving fast enough, then that's not the right kind of material handling system. The right cost. This is a picture of a very highly automated facility that's using robots to move things around and to do probably operations. And it's just to show you that really it's not necessarily the minimum cost that you're trying to go for in a material handling system, but the right cost. So sometimes people think minimum, but it's really the correct cost. And then looking at the right method. There's not usually one right method, and sometimes in a plant you're going to be using multiple methods. So maybe different kinds of forklifts for different areas, maybe some wider forklifts or some ones that can go higher. So not just using the same method for everything, right? Making sure that you really evaluate what is needed in a certain situation. So these are material handling principles. So just like when we were looking at the warehousing principles, these are having to do with material handling. So the first one is a planning principle. The idea that if you plan in advance, you're going to have a much better implementation of the material handling system. The material handling system can tie the whole thing together, but you need to definitely do a lot of thinking about how that's going to work out ahead of time. The standardization principle is less variation in equipment is better. So this is a picture of a whole bunch of different kinds of carts, and it would be better if you're using carts if you can minimize the number of carts, the number of different kinds of carts that you're going to be using, and have maybe one or two at the most in a factory so that there's a standardization. The idea of work principle. So work is equal to load times distance. And when you're thinking about material handling, this is what you need to think about. You can't just think about the load, and you can't just think about the distance. You have to actually consider the work that's done. And that's probably the best thing to do when you're doing some sort of metrics associated with material handling. Ergonomic principle, adapt the work to the worker and not the other way around. So this is a picture of a cart that somebody has a scissor lift on so that you can bring it up to the level that the worker doesn't have to lean over or reach up too far. And this is a really nice ergonomic thing to use. And so whenever you're doing any material handling, you need to consider the ergonomics of the situation. Unit load principle, I think we talked about this before, like how is the unit load defined? Exactly what is it that you're going to be carrying? In this case, these are pallets that are things can be loaded into, but it might be containers, it might be boxes. Really looking at what is the unit load, how is it defined? Space utilization, you need to consider three-dimensional space. So up to now, we've just been talking about the footprint of the things in the space requirement, but when you're thinking about material handling and storage, you also need to consider the three-dimensional space. The next one is the principles. The material handling, the system principle. Material handling can actually tie the entire plant together into one system if you do it correctly. The conveyors can run throughout the system. It can be run like clockwork, that you don't have to depend on a lot of people skills, that you can actually use automation to tie the whole thing together. And that's important to think about in a material handling system. Automation principle, that automation should be considered, especially if there's some sort of lifting or some quality things going on, that even in the strangest situations, that doesn't seem like it might be a good automation candidate, it actually can be. Environmental principles, so consider the environmental effect of your decisions. This looks at the triple bottom line principle. If you're using a lot of shrink wrap in your material handling system, you might want to consider that, because you're really creating a lot of plastic waste, and that might not be the best way to do things. Life cycle principle, so consider all the costs associated with the product life, from the raw material all the way to disposal, and you can consider that in a material handling system to try to minimize the life cycle costs. So now what we're going to do is look at, in Chapter 5, there is about 150 pages of material handling equipment. It's divided into these 4 categories, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm going to just really reference you to that when you think about material handling equipment, there is a really good resource here in this book on material handling. The first section talks about containers and unitizing equipment, so things like pallets or shrink wrap or different ways of doing that. And the second is material transportation equipment. So this is anything that moves the material, conveyors to forklifts to carts and things like that. The third is storage and retrieval equipment, looking at racks, and then any kind of ASRS, which is automatic storage and retrieval system, and also the picking methods that you might use if you have to use any equipment for that. And then the last area is automatic identification and communication equipment. So this is barcodes and RFID, and then the warehouse management system that usually interfaces with that. So as an example, I just took one thing, which is conveyors, and I just put in here all the different types of conveyors they have pictures of them in Chapter 5 in the appendix. So they have a picture of a chute conveyor, belt conveyor, and underneath that there's 4 types of belt conveyors: a flat belt, telescoping, troughed, magnetic. They also have a roller conveyor, a wheel conveyor, a slat, chain, trolley, power free, and cart on track. Now beyond that, there's also the sorting issues associated with the conveyor. So there's a deflector sorting, push diverter, rake puller, moving slat, pop-up skewed, pop-up belt and chain, pop-up roller, tilter slat, tilt tray, cross belt, and bombardier. So really, this is all I'm really showing you here is that there's a huge amount of variation in material handling. That's one of the reasons I've been showing you videos in class, because I wanted you to become familiar with the types of things in material handling, and there's a huge variety. So that is the last of this. This is the end of this video, and we'll have one more after this.